Welcome to the Brooklyn Rail's 878th New Social Environment. I'm Chloe Stagaman, Director of Programs here at the Rail, and I have the pleasure and privilege of being your MC today for a conversation featuring Theo Oshiro, Harold Solis, Jean Montrevil, and Reverend Dr. Donna Schaper. We're thrilled to welcome poet Ae Hee Lee here to close today's program. Before we get started, the Brooklyn Rail acknowledges Black Lives Matter. Here in New York, we're on Lenape-Hoking, the unceded land and waters of the Wappinger, Canarsie, Munsee, and Lenni Lenape people of the Delaware Nation and Shinnecock Indian Nation. We recognize land acknowledgements are not a replacement for necessary decolonial work, but serve as a reminder of place, of the legacies of dispossession and enslavement that sustain and enrich the stolen land we are speaking from. And now it's my absolute pleasure to introduce today's guests and host. As co-executive director at Make the Road New York, Theo Oshiro leads high-impact service programs, including adult literacy and health advocacy, heads their Westchester-based work, and conducts key fundraising and finance functions. A Peruvian immigrant raised in Queens, Theo joined Make the Road in 2005 and has helped expand the organization into New Jersey, Connecticut, and Pennsylvania, as well as led special projects on immigrant integration, civic engagement, green space accessibility, and census advocacy and outreach. Theo has been recognized several times for his contributions to immigrant communities. Harold A. Solis is an attorney and the co-legal director at Make the Road New York, where he directs the provision of Make the Road's legal services on a range of issues, including asylum and other humanitarian forms of relief. Prior to joining Make the Road New York, he was a supervising attorney at Immigrant Justice Corps, where he led its in-house removal defense practice and created IJC's Long Island Project to increase access to representation for Long Island families in removal proceedings. Haitian immigrant and longtime activist Jean Montrevil was targeted for 30 years by Immigration and Customs Enforcement for his activism. Montrevil was deported to Haiti in 2018 under the Trump administration, but got a second chance in 2021 when Virginia Governor Ralph Northam granted him a pardon, which ICE had used as a pretext to deport him. In April 2023, a U.S. judge ruled Montrevil would not face deportation again. And community builder Reverend Dr. Donna Schaper served as senior minister of Judson Memorial Church from 2006 to 2021. As an elder, she's passionately concerned about leaving the next generation well prepared for all they have to face. She's written over 35 books, and we are so lucky to have her as an editor-at-large at the Brooklyn Rail. And with that, I am going to pass it over to Donna.
Thank you very much, Chloe. It's great to see all of you, and I want to especially welcome any immigrants on this call. Anyone whose family came from another place, anybody whose family came from another place a long time ago, anybody who had a little heartbeat going with that land acknowledgement. And by that, I mean everybody on this call has some connection to having come from another place to here. And here we are on a call about the enormous subject of immigration, and just have an hour or a little more. And so I just want to start by saying, let's remember our own ancestors, all of us, and what they may have experienced, and hope that the people we become are people who welcome the next generations to this great land and do it strategically, wisely, and well. So on behalf of welcoming immigrants, which is to say all of us, I'm going to ask my friends from Make the Road. I'll start with Harold. Just tell us what's going on. How's the welcome going to immigrants right now? And what's your role in it? So tell us who you are, Harold. We'll start there.
Be here with such an amazing crowd. I'm going to start, but Theo, obviously, if you feel the need to jump in, please do so. I'm sure many of you are reading the headline, all right? You're seeing the different articles that are coming out that are really focusing on the moment that the city is experiencing in terms of the number of people that are trying to call New York home, right? I want to take a step back, right? Because whenever, we talk about this particular moment, we try to go beyond the headlines, right? And as an organization that is now entering its 25th year, for us, when we talk about immigration, we know that it's not something that started just last year, nor is it something that just started under Donald Trump. Right? The complexities, the disparate outcomes, the absurdity sometimes that permeates the system is something that goes back decades, and is something that is really deeply embedded in our immigration system. I'm sure Jean can say more about that. But for this particular conversation, right, much has been said and much has been talked about in terms of the sheer number, right? There's a lot of headlines are like, we're seeing thousands of people every day. We're, the city's, has over 50,000+ people in its care. Whenever we talk about this, we like to remember, number one, immigration, the idea of migration is such a natural and human activity, right? And it's not the first time that New York nor this country has seen a number of people try to make their way here seeking refuge. And nor is it the first time that we've seen a lot of doing that. Just in the last decade, right? We kind of different migration patterns, right? Where we've seen people from Central America and other parts of the world being forced to flee, right? Being displaced for a number of reasons. And each time we've had a similar kind of national conversation, right? Why so many people? Who should be here? Who should, get a welcome, welcome service, and who should be shown the door, essentially. And oftentimes we find ourselves having to remind folks, right, that our immigration system sometimes doesn't put as much emphasis on the caring portion, on the resettling portion. So much of our attention is often focused on how do we get a person on a path to deportation, as opposed to how do we get this person back on their feet now that they're here. So for over a year now, right, we've seen states like Texas and other, political actors who've taken the novel, in some ways, step of purposefully, right, designing relocation programs to send people, to bus people, to transport them across the country. Not so much to help them, get on their feet, but more so as a political move, right? As a way of scoring some kind of political points to sort of say, look at this quote unquote sanctuary city and watch them, right, struggle to live up to their principles. And, we've seen now for a year at this point, right, the city and our communities try as much as possible to live up to our principles here in New York, right? We've seen the city, along with many of us and our partners, try to stand up programs, right, to help people actually understand that if they are here seeking asylum, what they need to do in order to navigate that process. That if they need assistance with their their legal needs, to try to provide as much assistance as we can with the limited resources that we have. But it's been a real struggle. It has not been easy. We at Make the Road have been at the forefront of some of these efforts by trying to not just offer legal services, but also try to orient people as to their new surroundings here in the city. Right? If you've read the headlines or the articles, you've seen and heard about people who've been put on buses with very little information about where they're going and why they're going where they're going. And so, some of our basic efforts here have just been sort of welcoming people into our offices and giving them some food, and some food for their mind, right? Some information about what the world is like here in New York. Theo, I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add to that point.
No, I think of course, Harold, thanks so much for laying that out so well. I think that, you know, as an organization, we have really been doing a lot to not only provide a welcoming space for asylum seekers, right? We know that often the first thing that people notice and their first impression about our organization is that, you know, they say that our community centers don't feel like offices, they feel like homes, right? And so for us, it's been extremely important to open our doors, to make, you know, community members who have really been part of really arduous journeys to feel that they have a place to go to, and that they can call home. We immediately wanted to make sure that they were connected to resources. One of the most pivotal resources that we identified very early on is that many people didn't have any form of communication, any way to communicate. And so we provided them with free cell phones so that they could call loved ones, but also very practically stay in touch with service providers, right? With our attorneys, our health access providers, our teachers. So, you know, for us, it's really been about providing that kind of initial support and initial welcome, and then staying in touch with community members so that they are able to access different kinds of support over their journey here in New York. And so we're very proud of the work that we've been doing thus far. It's of course been extremely challenging to meet this need, not only as an organization, but I think for our city, our state, we're also trying to work at those levels to make sure that our local and statewide governments and national government are able to step up to this moment. Donna, I think you're
Unmute. Sorry. This whole conversation about the homing instinct is so central. Finding a home in a new place and being able to communicate, and how it just keeps erupting decade after decade. So let's hear from Jean for a minute, and then we're going to talk some more, try to get into some more stories and some more ways that we can help. Jean, it's great to have you here as one of the very few people who's ever been undeported. And
deported and undeported.
Right.
Yes.
Yes, deported and undeported. So
Undeported.
for people who don't know you, just give us a bit of your story, and I'll add whatever you forget.
Oh, well, Donna, thank you again for inviting me. And, you know, I'm always excited to speak about immigration issue. Again, I like for the audience to know that how much that you are one of my heroes. You have, from the beginning, Donna, you are the one that offered me sanctuary. So if
Right.
it wasn't for you, I will not be here. And for everything that you have done for me throughout my life, with my family, with my kids, so I will always be grateful to you.
Thank you.
And you having coming to visit me in Haiti right after I got deported, really your advice to Jean, you have to live in two fronts. One foot in Haiti, one foot in the US to come back to my children. Because my fight has always been about the separation of families. I refuse to be separated from my 4 US citizen children that I love very much and they love me. So, but my case started way in 1994, years ago, during the war on drugs in the 80s. I did get convicted of possession with intent to distribute. And I served my time. But when I came to this country, I came when I was 17 years old. I came with a green card. I came the right way. So with my conviction, I was unfairly the order to be deported to Haiti. When I say unfairly, because when you have a green card, you have the right for hearing. I had applied for a hearing, a 212C hearing, but back then, corruption was alive. The whole system was corrupted. Me, being naive and innocent, I didn't think that the government was corrupted against me. To make a long story short, on the day of my hearing, the judge told me that he let my lawyer withdraw for my case the day before. Now, this is my hearing date. So the judge forced me to proceed without having an attorney. And my witness that was on their way to the courtroom did not get a chance to testify on my behalf. I believe those were part of a conspiracy against me because I had claimed to citizenship since my father and my U.S. citizen stepmother were the one that applied for me. And I didn't know anything about the immigration law back then. So I think there was always a question whether I qualify for citizenship. But nevertheless, the judge ordered me to be deported in 1994. After I spent 11 years in prison, rehabilitated myself, get an education, stay out of trouble. I did all the right thing to get early parole. After 11 years, I was paroled to New York, but immigration never came for me. So I started to build a life. I have new kids. I met my fiance at that time. We were raising 2 beautiful children. And then in 2005, which was to me the best years of my life, guys, the best year. I was working, I employed people, I took over my family's business. I was doing so well. Then immigration came, ICE came in 2005. By the way, I was on 5-year supervision. I finished my supervision release. And then that's when they set me up to come to the probation officer. And that's when ICE were there waiting for me. So I got detained in 2005. I spent 7 months in detention somewhere in Maryland. That's when then my ex-wife, Janae, started to look for help. She found Families for Freedoms. And then we became a member of Family for Freedom. When I came home, they're the one who got me released. So I stay out of trouble, build up my life, take care of my family. I stay on supervision with immigration with ICE for 15 years. I never miss one check-in. I always checked in. But once Trump became president, things started changing for me. First check-in, I was detained. Second check-in, they didn't even wait for me to come for my second check-in. They came to my house and they said I was being deported. I was detained. 10 days later, I found me in Haiti, a country that I left 37 years ago, totally different. I had no family there. All my family has been in this country. So I spent 3.5 years in Haiti. I've always had good supporters. The NYU Law Clinic, Immigration Law Clinic, took my case, filed a lawsuit on my behalf. Then we negotiated that lawsuit for my return. And in October 2021, I was granted parole to come back when ICE realized that they were going to lose the lawsuit. That's when I was granted back and given a chance to have my case reopened. That's what for 20 years, I fought for that, to have my case reopened so I can apply for a waiver. And finally, they agreed to have the case reopened. And finally, this year, with all the support that I had, we had a 212C hearing, and the judge, and let me quote the judge for you guys. Jean, I see the good in you, and I will grant you your waiver. Then that was, I finally got my freedom that I've been seeking for almost 30 years. It's been a wild journey, and I don't want to forget to thank people from my church, my friend Jane. She might be in this group, I'm not sure.
She's here.
Yes, she has been one of my biggest supporters, Donna. I mean, she has done everything for me while I was in Haiti. Her phone call gave me strength, courage, you know, and I cannot thank her enough. And the people from my church, they have been I'm so grateful to them. And if it wasn't for them, trust me, I will not be here today. As you guys probably know, Haiti is a country in chaos right now. Just last night, I was talking to a friend of mine back in Haiti. 80 to 90% of Haiti is controlled by gangs members. And 2 years ago, they killed the president. There has not been a president since. And people are dying in Haiti. People are running for their life, leaving their house behind. It's terrible, terrible, terrible. So, Dana, again, thank you so much. You are one of my.
Thank you for, there you go. And this is Jane Truehold,
Yeah,
who is chair of the new sanctuary task force, immigration task force at Judson Memorial Church. And there's a bunch of her friends on here. And I think they're dancing, but I think they're dancing their way out of the courtroom where the waiver come from. So Harold, what do you think? How about we get a dance party going for a lot of people? What should we do? What's your best thought after you hear Jean's story or pieces of it?
Well, Theo can say this, but you know, make the road. We're always up for a good dance party. But every time, you know, this is my first time being in the same virtual or even physical room with Jean, but I've heard of Jean's saga for a while now, and you know, I'm so happy, you know, that you're on the other side of it. But you know, anytime I think about what you went through, what you endured, I always remember that there were so many other people who are going through similar situations, you know.
Yeah.
And absolutely.
And it's not everybody, right, who ends up on the other side of it. And you know, I saw the comment in the chat, you know, about sort of trying to address some of the unfairness, right, that we see in the system by securing the right to counsel. I don't disagree with that sentiment. You know, I think that definitely makes a lot of sense. I mean, if you know, immigration law, our immigration system is one of the few remaining places in our legal system, in our political order, where, you know, you can face a life or death situation, the separation of your family, your community, from your family or your community. And it can all happen without you sort of fully understanding what you're going through, because the government, you know, doesn't provide you with that kind of thing. And so, yeah, you know, it makes a lot of sense. I fear for some of the new folks who are here, you know, who are now sort of embarking on the same path, you know, Jean, that you had to endure, and who will have to go through the same challenges, right? Not being able to secure representation, not understanding or being thrown into a super complicated system that, you know, if you think about our asylum system, you know, whenever we think about it, like in common parlance, we think about what it means to give refuge, right? What it means to give protection. And you would think that in a logical and more commonsensical system, the bases for giving people that kind of protection would be more inclusive, would be more understanding and more adaptable to the changing ways in which we as humans have had to endure all sorts of travesties, right, in our home countries. The reality is that, you know, our asylum system is so under-inclusive, right, that we see people who get ordered deported not because, you know, they don't have a legitimate fear of returning back home, but because our law is so stingy, right, in terms of what it will recognize as a basis for asylum, that people get deported on that basis. You know, and one of the sad parts is that sometimes people don't know that, right? They don't know how stingy our laws can be and don't realize that the reasons they might be ordered deported has nothing to do with them really, or their basis for coming here in the first place, but more so because the law just hasn't been adapted to the 21st century.
And I want to add, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, to add to what you're saying right now. Me, myself, I had no idea that I could be facing deportation because I came with a green card. And I didn't know people with green card were deported. I have a permanent alien card, permanent. So I think in 1996, Bill Clinton changed the immigration laws. And then that make a whole lot of immigrants now being deportable because of some type of aggravated felony system that they have in place. And I hate to say it, Bill Clinton was the one that really sold the immigrants out. Why now we have no rights? Immigrants, we have no rights. We have no voices, no one defending us in Congress. We have nothing. All we have is McDowell, Donna Schaper, Justin Memorial Church. This is what we have. You know, the movement. That's all we have, guys, and we have to be really take notes of that. This is all we got, you guys. And then we have to do something about it. I remember might have been in 2008 or 2012 when Obama said, who wins when a family separated from the children? Who wins when you deport a father? Who wins? After then, we had a chance with the Obama. But Obama actually deport more immigrants than his previous administration. So now we have Biden, which Biden, I think, in my opinion, probably wants to do something for immigrants, but his hands is tied. He has the pressure with the border, the people that's crossing the border. And recently he made a new policy allowing Haitians, Nicaraguan, I believe Venezuelan, and Ukrainians to come in without having a visa, as long as you have a family that can financially support you in the US. That system started in January 6th. By January 15th, we were celebrating. Haitian was coming, Cuban was coming. Now, all of a sudden, more people take an interest in it. Like me, for example, who have my friends in Haiti that wanted to come, I was able to find a sponsor for her. Guess what? The system falls now. Now, only a little bit. So, right. Politicians, man, I cannot trust them. You see what I'm saying? I cannot trust them. We have to take matters in our own hands. Donna, go ahead.
No, I was going to say that this is a really interesting story to kind of go through the politics of it and to figure out. I just wanted to correct you on one thing. When you say all we got is a movement and a church, that's enough. But it's not small. It's not small. The systems that are against people are very powerful and very stupid. And they don't really know what they're doing. I mean, I've met immigration lawyers who don't understand immigration law. No offense to my friends who are lawyers who are on this, Theo. You know, it's just, it's so complicated and it's so tied up, and it's so but we understand that at its root, it's trying to get rid of people like Jean, who built the American economy, who are great fathers. I got to show my picture right now from 2010, when I think I can get it. This is Jean's children, way back when. They're all like incredibly successful human beings right now, doing good in the world like Jean was doing. One of the reasons the movement developed around Jean was he was such a good citizen. He was the guy who would help everybody else out. And the idea that we're throwing people like that out of the country, it's crazy. It's sort of like a farmer not plowing the farmer's field, throwing stuff away. So we got arrested, we built a movement, and Jean got back. And the only question is how it goes to scale. And that's what I'm counting on Make the Road for. So tell us more. How can we help?
Well, Donna, I just want to really, really, really agree with you about the fact that, organizations like Make the Road, faith leaders, faith institutions, and really just, ordinary people that are not connected to institutions really have so much power and potential power, right? I know that many of us are wondering what can be our role, right? What can we do, right? And so one of the most heartening things that we've seen over the last, the last 10 years have been probably some of the most difficult for our members at Make the Road, because we had the Trump years, right? We then had the pandemic, which impacted, our community members. We lost upwards of 150 members of our organization alone to the pandemic, right? Because our members were more likely to be uninsured. They were more likely to not have access to care. They were more likely to live in crowded housing. So, for us, in addition to delivering the services, it's crucial that we help to organize people, right? So that regular people have a way to make their voice heard, whether it be on the issue of access to legal representation, or access to affordable housing, or access to health insurance for the undocumented, among many other issues that we work on. So I just wanted to really highlight and underscore what you just said about the potential for people to really make change in their communities. And I'll highlight one more thing. I know we were talking, and Jean was talking a little bit about the federal level. The city, New York City and New York State can do so much for immigrant communities, right? They can fund legal services. They can have their, state entities stop cooperating with ICE. That really helps mitigate what is, often a terrible situation for immigrant families. And so there's also, often we think about, DC and the national level and the intractability of the situation there. But really there's a lot to push for even locally, even as we're trying to achieve what we want to achieve at the national level.
So what do you think is going on with ICE under Biden? I mean, how has it changed as you see it? I can tell it's changed for a range of reasons, but what do you see?
Harold, I'll turn it to you, because I know you have the most day-to-day experience on this, but I want to say that, of course, right, under Trump, we saw, and many of us heard of the most horrible things happening with ICE being used as this deportation machine, really trampling on civil rights in order to accomplish what their mission was, to deport as many people as possible, no matter, their situations, whether they had loved ones, whether they had U.S. citizen children, etc. So we know that of course the Trump administration weaponized ICE in a way that we hadn't seen before. At the same time, ICE is ICE, right? And so under any administration, including under the Biden administration, it continues to deport people without that much concern over, the individual situations, or that families will be torn apart, right? And of course, we have lawyers who can fight against that and work within the system to get just outcomes. But in reality, ICE at its core is an unfair entity, right? It's an entity that is meant to separate families, that is meant to send people back to countries where they may be in danger. And so I want to underscore that we've seen a difference. However, we know that people are still facing a lot of the same that they had been facing before the Biden years, right? And it's been to our chagrin that there's been such a limited scope of action at the national level to remedy the situation, so that we can really get at the core of what we need to accomplish. So Harold, I want you to weigh in on that question too, just because I know you have a lot of the viewpoint from our lawyers who are working on these cases and really see the nuances of the differences.
Yeah, no, but I think that's right on point, Theo, right? Like, I think whenever we think about the moment that we're in with this administration and what we're seeing coming out of ICE, we're not seeing, a radical reimagining of this enforcement agency, right? We're seeing minor tweaks, right? We're seeing, a slight, cutback on their approach. But at the end of the day, right, ICE is still operating within a broader system that is very binary. It's very much you're either deported or you're not, right? And all of the other sort of gears in the system are set up in such a way that it favors removal as opposed to belonging, right? And so what we've seen in the last 2+ years is sort of failed attempts, right, at trying to rein in ICE in some ways, right? In the first 100 days, in the first few days of the Biden administration, we heard about this moratorium that the administration had been thinking about. As soon as the ink was dry, right, they were sued, and immediately, we know the story, right? Texas sues, one of the southern states sues, Texas or a southern court enjoins one of these policies, and then that doesn't go anywhere. Same thing, the administration tried various times to create policies around prioritization, right? In other words, who they would prioritize, enforcement against, and we saw them get sued for that. And it wasn't until this past summer, right, that the Supreme Court clarified what we all knew forever, that, the administration has broad discretion in terms of how it chooses to utilize its enforcement powers. But that wasn't really the point, right? The point was to play the long game, delay the policy as much as possible, and throw people's lives, into jeopardy, because, everybody was walking around not knowing whether the Biden administration had full control over ICE, whether they could really dictate, the policies and enforcement policies. And that's all you need for people in our communities to feel uncertain, right? More concretely, what are we seeing? We're still seeing people detained. People are still, ICE still has contracts with private contractors and that run these detention systems, that even literally just yesterday, right, there were reports that were coming out about, some of the things that happened under the Trump administration in terms of like barbaric conditions in some of these places. But there's no sign that any of that has abated, right? These are things that we're in the movement, like we've been talking about them for years. These are the patterns. People are still, going to immigration court without representation. People are still being placed on, these sort of like rocket docket type situations where, they have a little over a year, right, to sort of get their case in order, find representation, get ready for a super complicated trial on asylum, puts expediency over justice, right? So that's what we're seeing. On the periphery, we are seeing, sort of like a return to more raids. You know, we have a raids team here that does just phenomenal work to try to respond whenever, you know, we hear about community members who are being detained and they have, you know, maybe they have a prior order of removal. So those people are really at jeopardy of being deported very quickly. And, you know, that part of our department has been reporting an uptick in the number of raids against those folks. So that's pretty concerning.
Yes. Yes.
And, you know, oftentimes we're talking about people who've been here for years, right? Similar to Jean's situation. Maybe they didn't have lawful permanent residence, maybe they did, but they essentially called this place home. So I think the short version is we're not seeing the kind of, you know, reforms and, you know, humane policies, you know, that the system deeply needs. We still have an immigration court that operates strictly out of, you know, the prosecutorial arm of the federal government, the Department of Justice.
Right.
You know, we're still seeing limited, you know, new forms of relief coming our way, you know, and sometimes we're getting into deep arguments with the administration about things that should be so obviously on the table, right? Like expanding temporary protection status for countries like Venezuela, right? We know that a lot of the people who are just coming here and are being placed on removal proceedings are from places like Venezuela. There are some easy policy ways, right, of like remediating the number of people who are being placed in removal proceedings by simply offering them this form of relief that already exists for so many of their other compatriots. It's just a matter of erasing and putting in a new date. That takes less work, right, than funding and feeding an enforcement system and you know, sending people back to a really difficult situation.
Yeah, and I asked Jean before the conversation if I could bring up his friend in Haiti, who we've done all the paperwork. We want her here. He wants her here. And, you know, it takes a long time to do this kind of stuff. And we've got people who will sponsor her. And it just got stopped. It just collapsed. And so it's hard to understand how, I mean, I can understand when there are 50,000 people, you know, crossing the border or pick your number and flooding a city. I can understand that might be a hard problem, right? But when you've got a system to bring one by one, and you've got, I always like to say the history of immigration is two histories. One is all the people who just want to throw them out, and the other is all the good people who adopt them and want to bring them in, and who are taking them into their homes in Buffalo, etc., upstate. It's really, there's another story there. And there are a lot of people who are willing to step up and do the right thing. But when the system just collapses, as it did for Bella, our friend, it just collapsed. You know, it needs to, it wouldn't be hard to get her here, is all I'm saying. It would not be hard. And the same thing goes with Jean's, you know, ongoing harassment by this little stuff. So Jean, what would you do to get her here right now? What else can we do?
Well, I think we have been asking the Biden administration to move the process forward, make it more obviously they are investigating or do a background check on the financial support. So do it more rapidly.
Right.
You know, move the process more up, just like they did at the beginning.
Right.
At the beginning, people was coming in, you know, we got happy. So now I understand now they have a whole lot more people online. They're supposed to be letting 7,500 Haitian and 7,500 Cubans, 7,500 Ukrainians a month. But when I look at the processing who they have been approved since January, so you'll see 5,000. Where's the 30,000 people that were they supposed to let in every month? Only 5,000 and change. I see as Haitian. But the numbers of the program call for 7,500. I mean, we all know immigration has been slow, it's a slow process. Look, I applied for my new green card since last year. I still have not received it yet. It says, so hire more people who make the system more efficient. You know, more. They keep saying they'll do it, but they never do. They don't do what they say they promise. They never keep up with the promise.
Right. Yeah, system's flooded. Well, I want to talk a little bit for sure about Make the Road. And one of my favorite things is your slogan, Here to Stay. And this is from the old Capitol campaign that was still in my files. But it's just a great slogan that goes with the great work. And I want to hear you all talk about how you respond. I just love your new building. It's crazy. Maybe it's not new anymore, but it's crazy good that when an immigrant goes to get help, it's less like an office and more like a home. To me, that's everything. And I just want to say a good word for some of the good people at Judson Memorial Church. When we started our clinics, they said, we have to serve cookies and drinks, cookies and punch. And I thought, oh my God, that's just the craziest idea I ever heard. But it was just exactly the right thing to do. And we served cookies and punch. Maybe one kid would get one cookie and a tiny thing of punch, but it was beautiful. So tell us about why it's more like a home than an office and what that means to you.
And thank you for mentioning our new building. We you know, it's a really great story because we started actually the project right at the beginning of the Trump administration. We actually purchased land for the first time in Corona, Queens, which, you know, is one of the most diverse neighborhoods in all of New York and maybe the country and the world, right? We all know that area of Jackson Heights and Corona is extremely diverse and made up of immigrants and built by immigrants. And so when that election happened and Trump became president, our members really, that the meaning of that building or that future building really changed, right? It made it so that it was a symbol more than an actual physical resource, which of course it is, but it was a resource that our members, predominantly low-income immigrants, were here to stay, that we were building an actual physical structure that would symbolize the resilience and the presence, right, of immigrant communities. So that I think for us was a great moment. We're actually putting the finishing touches on this building. You know, we haven't actually moved in yet because we started construction 2 weeks, I believe, before the pandemic, and so we had to grind everything to a halt, unfortunately, and then there was a lot of delays. But we're very much almost there. By the end of this year, we hope to have that completed. If folks want to see any renderings or are interested in seeing the building in any way or supporting us in that way, you can go to our website. But, you know, I think for your on your question on what it means to be a home and not so much an office, of course, that has to do with the physical space and kind of the ways in which we set up our community center. They're colorful, right? There's the food, you know, you mentioned cookies and punch. We often do that plus rice, beans, and chicken, right? Like we make sure that there's a lot of ways for people to break bread together, which I think, as you note, is important to building community. And then we also, you know, via our programming, are intentional about, you know, building a sense of home and community via shared struggle, via shared finding of solutions, right? So you know, we do a lot of community organizing, and what that means for us is that people come to committee meetings based on issue areas, right? Whether it's immigration, like we're talking about today, whether it's worker rights, whether it's housing, right? We know that the housing affordability crisis is very big and real here in New York. Really a range of issues, parents in schools, youth who are tackling policing issues, right? So, and these become places that people are able to talk about issues from a very personal, in a very personal way, right? Like maybe the kinds of police harassment they've faced, or the deportation that their family suffered, or the displacement and eviction that, you know, that happened in their family. And so, you know, really powerful moments of sharing stories, and then devising solutions, right? Because really our people are very focused in on, well, what do we do about this issue? What do we do about this thing? And so we've worked on many issues, right? So some might remember, I know we partnered with Judson a lot on the Fund for Excluded Workers, right? Where our communities were able for the first time to access funds from the state of New York, who've been, you know, been impacted by the pandemic, right? These were people who had never received a dime from federal stimulus funds, or, you know, any kind of unemployment benefits or relief, when they were oftentimes the ones out there when we were still, many of us were still at home, right? They were doing deliveries, they were taking care of kids, they were doing all of this stuff.
Yep.
So we saw that it was crucial that the state step up and create a $1.2 billion, billion with a B, fund, so that immigrants could get grants, right? If they had been on, and many of them had been unemployed for many years, right? And so these were the kinds of groundbreaking things that can happen when people, and to go back to your question, build together as, you know, within a community, within a home, right? Feeling that warmth and love that comes from a place, a community, and really building together. So, you know, for us, it's really about, you know, the physical space. I think our new building will be another example of that, but also of the ways in which we tackle our work, which I think is very focused on community building as a very foundational piece of the work.
Yeah, yeah, and I could talk to you, everybody, all afternoon about the difference, the importance, absolute importance of politics, the absolute importance of community organizing, and the absolute importance of cultural organizing, like you're describing right now. And you put all that in a pot together and you get change. You get change. And we all have seen a little bit of change, and we'd like to see a lot more. So I'm just so glad about the building and its ethos, its way of being in the world. Because the real question here is hospitality. How can we move from host-based hospitality to host-based, from host-based hostility? You know, get the hell out. What a crazy way to live. So, Jean, I need to hear one more thing from you. How are the kids?
They are fine. You know, they're working. Josiah's in school. Janaya graduated from college. She got a master's degrees in business administration. Then you just said something very powerful. I think in the New Secular movement, when I used to go around church, I used to speak about the good immigrant. What this country, the engine. The engine of this country is immigrants. Every single one of us, every single American have benefit from immigrants. You can get your nails towed by immigrants. You get your coffee, your bed made by immigrants. You when you go to a hotel, who serve you? Immigrants. We are all beneficial of immigrants. Immigration has always been the same, just like 200 years ago. People looking for a better way to support their family. It's the same today. People are coming to this country because they can't live in their homeland. Nobody wants to leave their homeland. We have to welcome immigrants here. This country will suffer without immigrants, and this country needs immigrants more than immigrants need this country. And we have to let this message Spray, let the people know what made this country great as it is today. It's all because of immigrants.
Yep. Yep. And you bringing up that question about the good immigrant and the bad immigrant. We always have to be careful about the heroism story. It's just, in a way, I don't know who needs who more, the worker or the hirer, but we kind of need the work. Right?
Well, we need the companies in this country are suffering because of lack of workers right now. You know,
Right.
Yes, they are suffering. This is one of the reasons Biden opened up the country now,
Right.
because we lack of good workers. Immigrants has always work to support their families. They make this country go. They are the engine of this country. They are the engine. Every single one of Americans benefit from immigrants. And we have to let them know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. All right, Chloe, what should we do next? Want to get some of these questions out of the chat? I haven't been following it, so.
Yeah, I've got the questions. First of all, thank you all so much for this dialogue today. This has been really, really powerful and informative, and I really appreciate all of your insights. The first question is going to be from Taylor. Taylor, I'm going to give you the chance to unmute and ask directly.
Hi, can you hear me? Sorry, I'm in a coffee shop. Okay. First of all, God bless you all. This was such a beautiful, beautiful just dialogue to listen to. My question is, I'm a filmmaker and based in Los Angeles, and part of my work in writing stories is to broaden the perspective of immigrants in America. And so I was wondering, I have actually a two-part question. What are good, reliable resources to broaden the narrative around the American immigration system? And specifically to Theo and Harold, what have you found as far as mental health resources have been effective? I love your mission of building community. That is so wonderful and so important. But are there practical mental health resources you found that are more effective than others in helping people navigate the emotional labor of being an immigrant in this country? Thank you.
Great question.
So I can start, and Taylor, thanks for your kind words and for your questions. You know, I would invite as one starting point, we've actually collected a lot of resources as an organization. So if you go to our website, which is maketheroadny.org, there is a resources section that has a wealth of resources. It has, you know, all of our Know Your Rights resources, as well as any reports that we've done, not only on immigration, but on a lot of different issues that are often, you know, the way that we approach many issues is via the impact on immigrant communities, right? Not only in New York, but across the state, across the country. So that is, I think, a great starting point. What I'll say also is that, you know, on your mental health question, so it's been a huge challenge. It's been very clear in the last, you know, 7 to 8 years that there's been, for us as an organization, more and more requests for mental health services from our membership, and also our staff, right? Because of the very difficult stories and jobs that they have, that stories they hear and jobs they have. And so one of the things that we've been working on has been this issue of getting health insurance coverage for the undocumented, because we know that health services, including mental health resources and services, are often not available or actually out of reach financially, unless you have insurance. If you have insurance, there's a little bit more possibility, but even then, even with insurance, there is a dearth of not only mental health providers, but mental health providers who speak languages other than English, and who may have experience with working with people around the trauma of migration, immigration enforcement, and many of the related issues that our community members face. So, you know, it's definitely been a challenge to find those providers. New York City did a program a couple of years ago, I believe is still in place, which was a mental health resource hotline, where, you know, it was multilingual. You could get access to mental health providers for that kind of support. And, you know, it wasn't, of course, longer term counseling or other mental health services, but it was really at least an option, right, for a community that has very, very few options. I'll also say that via for our young people, it's also been a resource that's been needed more and more. We've been focusing in on the importance of community schools, right? Setting up these schools, community schools within the public school system that integrates holistic services for students and parents within the schools. So mental health resources and services has been a big part of that. So as we set up our community school in one of the neighborhoods we work in Bushwick, we made sure to have social workers that could provide some mental health services and also provide targeted referrals for people. So, you know, there's been some efforts, and we've also had, during the Trump years, we had a lot of mental health professionals who reached out and wanted to help. So we set up group counseling, often with mental health providers who spoke Spanish primarily for our membership. So that's been some of what we've been able to do, but of course it's been a challenge to get, you know, solutions at scale, right? Given the huge need in our communities. Harold, I don't know if you have anything more to say on that or on the immigration system resource information question.
In terms of resources, I'm a fan of the track folks up in Syracuse, TRAC as in cat, and they run a really phenomenal program where, you know, they analyze a lot of raw data about immigration proceedings. For the most part, it's great. To no fault of their own, they're sort of dependent on the data that they get from the government, and sometimes it's, you know, they will, you know, very explicitly say, like, this data might be shaky. But for the most part, they do a really great job of painting a pretty objective picture of, you know, the outcomes that we're seeing, the disparate outcomes, you know, across the system. So I never recommend.
Thank you so much for that question, Taylor. And thank you for those really detailed responses, Theo and Harold. That was an extremely generative question. The next question is going to be from G. G, I'm going to give you a chance to unmute.
Thank you so very much, Chloe, and thank you, panel. And what a resource this has been to tell all of us today, expanding so many things out. A long time I've been fascinated and wondered about if you could speak to the success or otherwise of the New York Immigrant Family Unity Project. That's for anybody, I guess.
Go for it, Harold.
Happy to take this one. This is one of the issues that's near and dear to my heart. Putting aside for a second, right, the deeper, broader reforms that obviously the system requires, right? If we're talking about just like some basic, you know, things that any basic reform should have these days, you would think that it would be at least at a minimum, you know, making sure people have representation in a system where the decision is, do you stay with in your home, or do you have to, you know, be banished elsewhere? You would think that the system would offer representation regardless of your ability to afford one. You would think that that would make a lot of sense in a country that prides itself, right, on the right to counsel. It's 2023, and that is not the case. So the New York Immigrant Family Unity Project, NYFA for short, right, is one of those landmark programs of the last decade that really put to rest this idea of, can it be done? Is it a good idea to offer, representation to people who are in deportation proceedings? Will it make a difference? Those questions have been, like, in my opinion, very clearly answered by NYFA, in the sense that pre-NYFA, all right, the outcomes for people without representation were documented as being really, really staggering in terms of how many people ended up losing their cases. Post-NYFA, the people who've been able to access this program, the outcomes, as reported again by organizations like TRAC and others, right, have definitively shown that just having a lawyer doesn't necessarily guarantee that you'll be able to remain in this country, but it exponentially, improves those chances. And so, the NYFA program started, as the result of a research, essentially, group that former Chief Judge Katzman of the Second Circuit here in New York sort of helped, put together a whole bunch of really smart and dedicated people to think about this issue. And when NYFA came about, it was groundbreaking because it was really geared to help perhaps the people who are most vulnerable to removal in our removal system, which are those who are detained, because of how hard it is for them to communicate with the outside world. And so, over the years, NYFA has now expanded a bit more, right? There are sort of mirror programs across the state. It is still very much a local, and when I say local, I mean like New York as opposed to federal government funded program. And we've seen different iterations of it now sort of coming up in other parts of the country. And so, it's part of, I think, a larger movement, within the movement, immigrant rights movement, to try to ensure at least this basic protection for folks. And, wherever NYFA gets replicated, I think the numbers speak for themselves in terms of like how people are faring. So I think, thank you for asking that question. I think, if the numbers speak for themselves. My only comment, as I've come to learn over the years, right, is that it's still not the silver bullet, right? There is still a larger and deeper need to think about how under-inclusive, how overly punitive our immigration system is. How such little space there is for forgiveness and for second chances, right? And just understanding that migration is not itself no crime. That people move because we're humans and we are inclined to movement.
Yeah. I mean, I want to just add something more theoretical to this conversation, and it has to do with joining the mental health conversation to the family conversation. And I think that, again, the way people are moved is by knowing that somebody is being unfairly treated in a way that they could identify with. And more people who might be anti-immigrant are experiencing the crisis of mental illness in their own families, because it's all too friggin' much for people, right? It's not just your staff, it's my staff. It's not just, it's not small. So talking about what added burden there is to an immigrant to lose their family or to lose their mind, when you're already still waiting for the green card, right? And working without it. When you're already at max, and the fact that you get up in the morning, and I wish Jean he could tell you about how too much it was for so long, about blood pressure and heart attacks and things that are stress-borne diseases. This is what people are failing. It's not funny. it's real. It's as real. And we Americans love to talk about the material aspects of oppression. Oh my God, they don't have any money. Oh my God, they don't have any peace of mind. There's lots of ways to move people, and I think we need to tell these stories. And I love the family approach that you just talked about, and why you like it, Harold, because I love it too. It humanizes the dehumanized.
Thank you, Donna, and thank you, Harold, and thank you, GE, so much for that very generous and great question. We have two more questions. Our next question is going to be from Giali. Giali, I'll give you the chance to unmute.
Hello, everyone. So nice to meet you. This is my first time, and I get very lucky connection here. So my question is that possible to improve the process of the plantation of the visa? Because I'm experiencing something right now about my visa. So the story is, I'm still waiting for my visa right now, since I submit that by the end of June. And during the plantation, I would say, and during the pending process, I'm not able to work, and also I'm facing the problem is my school gonna start next week, and I have no idea what to do right now. And so I just talk about this with my lawyer, and she also has no idea what we can do. The only thing is, maybe we can try and submit the premier processing fee, which is increased to $2,500. I believe this fee was cheaper, but right now it just increased. It just feels very crazy. So I have no idea what to do, and so far the only things I can do is waiting for my visa. But I'm facing something. I'm not sure, should I stay here or just go back to my country? Because it looks like I'm just here and to do nothing. And fortunately, I joined this meeting, and so just tell you all right now, I'm frozen, and yeah, probably need some help, or yeah, maybe just wait. But we don't, like me and my lawyer, we don't even know how long this process will take. It already more than 6 weeks from my submission. So probably will be next week, or probably it comes maybe next month, or even longer. So yeah, maybe it's good. The question I want to ask is, the process, how we can improve this process, maybe hire more people, they can just help immigration process, and also this case. Yeah, I'm brand new. I'm not I even don't have any right now. I'm not qualified to apply for green card because I'm still a dance artist working in the dance industry, and hosting my show and teaching as a teaching artist for nonprofit, and also doing my study at Hunter College. So I'm doing a lot of things, but I feel like right now I'm facing a crisis. So don't know what to do in my life.
I can try to chime in a little bit here, but others should definitely feel free to jump in. I'll just say really quickly, Giali, I hear you and I feel you. This is that other side of our immigration system that sometimes doesn't necessarily get the headlines, but our immigration system also has this other side where people are navigating a maze, a bureaucratic maze that is sometimes super slow, and equally, if not also, more confusing in terms of the different types of visas, the different types of statuses. How do you get from one to another? If you fall in between a gap, can you move on to go, right? It is also troubling. And I've had people in my life who've had to be in a similar situation, Jolly, who it takes a toll on them as well, because your life is sort of on hold. You're waiting for that next piece of paper to come in and to tell you, can you stay? Should you go? And it is a really, really, really hard way to organize your life. It also reminds me of, just analogously, just so folks have a sense, right? Like, we have DACA recipients, right, who've been living on this sort of like renewal every 2-year sort of phase of their lives, right? Every 2 years, they're like renewing their paperwork. But every 2 years, that means their life is on pause because they're waiting for their next piece of paper to come in.
Right.
And to me, Gialli, when I hear you, first of all, good thing you have a lawyer, that's somebody that you're, sort of at least consulting on some of this. But I'm not surprised that they're also equally befuddled by what their options might be. Because the reality is, this side of the immigration system is not all the time, right, as resourced and as funded as ICE and other enforcement side of things. So what that sometimes translates into is a slower bureaucratic process, and it's people like you who are sort of on the receiving end of it and have their lives just sort of exactly what you described earlier, right? You're like, what should I stay? Should I go back home?
Right.
And part of our fight here at Make the Road includes trying to get the administration to move a little faster on actually the things that they can do, the things, the statuses and relief, that the machinery, right, that runs the immigration system that can actually help people, but they should be moving faster on that to mitigate some of these painful and anxiety-driven moments that you were describing earlier, Gialli.
Right.
Thank you so much for that question, Gialli. And thank you for that response, Harold. Our final question today is going to be from the Rail's publisher and artistic director, Fong. Fong, I'll give you the chance to unmute.
Thank you, Chloe. Thank you, Harold. Thank you, Donna. Thank you also, Jean and Theo. It's very moving for me because my family fled Vietnam. We came here as boat people, landed in Pennsylvania in the very unattractive township of Ben Salem in Bucks County. And my parents started out creating a cleaning service business. We clean wealthy people's homes. We clean churches and synagogues and whatnot in order to provide the necessary means to send my siblings to colleges. And we fled Vietnam to come here for freedom. And I think that's a very important thing to stress. And I admire what Jean said earlier. We know there's has been 4 waves of immigration throughout the U.S. The first one in 1840, and then 1850s, and then the second in 1880s, and then the third in 1890 to the turn of the century. And then, of course, the most recent one, the fourth one, is 1960 and onward. And it's so interesting to me to remind ourselves how lucky that we have freedom, and why all immigrants came here for that very, very aspiration in a way, because right now, with Putin aggression, gave rise to Ukrainian people with their courage. And then as a result, it unified European Union, gave Biden administration an incredible gift. And I think it's time to re-inject why immigrants are so important, as Jean described so beautifully. and why you all do the work that you do. Because let's face it, we all witness throughout history, all dictator or some kind of demagogue, in their regime share one thing in common. Namely, if there are no political alternatives, they can survive by using anything. I mean, virtually any form and shape of criminality, corruption, and abuse of power and whatnot, no matter how blatant they're incompetent in governance, But we have self-corrective mechanism here in this country. And that's why we came here, for that very, very key idea to redeploy the freedom of imagination, freedom of self-worth, and do whatever we do to create the value out of nothing. And I think it's important to work together to amplify the idea uniqueness of what we bring to this country too, in different group, ethnic group, immigration group, and whatnot. There's no need to put everybody and have them melt in a melting pot. I think it's nice to conceive ourselves as broadly as a symphony, where every instrument have its own unique voices, sound, and each of us have that sound, that individuality, and we can bring that to the symphony, which is what I think of democracy is. It's about. So it's a worthwhile undertaking that you're doing, and I'm grateful. We're grateful to Donna, our most heroic being, been doing it all her life. And so it's not a question, it's just a commentary, really, and being grateful, appreciate all of you for doing it. So with that, I think we can join together and fight in solidarity. Wherever the necessary fight that we fight, we'll do it. So let us know how we can participate, really. Meanwhile, onward with cosmic optimism. Thank you.
And great confidence that one day we'll look back on all this and say, wow, was this ever fun? We won.
Yes.
We won.
Yes, Donna.
And Jean, welcome home.
Thank you, Jean. Welcome home. Thank you, Theo. Thank you, Harold. Back to you, Chloe.
Thank you so much, Fong, for those final words. And thank you again to Donna and to Harold and to Theo and to Jean. This conversation has been so generous and wonderful and important. So we're really thankful to all of you. We at the Rail have a tradition of ending our community events with a poetry reading. And today it's my pleasure to welcome our poet laureate of the day, Ae Hee Lee, to the stage. Born in South Korea and raised in Peru, Ae Hee Lee is the author of Asterism, selected by John Murillo for the 2022 Dorset Prize and forthcoming from Tupelo Press, and the poetry chapbooks Bedtime, Riverbed, Dear Bear, and Conotary. Please join me in welcoming Ae Hee Lee.
Thank you, Chloe. I feel incredibly grateful to have been able to attend such an essential conversation and honored to close today's event with poetry. I'll be reading a total of 3 poems from my forthcoming collection, Asterism. And asterism can mean a visible pattern of stars or a group of 3 asterisks. The first poem is called Green Card, as evidence of adequate means of financial support. I needed money. There's no poetic way to say this. Even so, when you touched my face, brought my cheeks to the nook of your neck, I burrowed into it, a firefly seeking shelter from winter, far underground. Then you told me there's no application form that can hold the entirety of a life, because our days constantly spill like wine. Imagine that, you said, apricot tones all over the page. You told me about ferns bejeweled with jade dew, their coiled fiddleheads full of unfulfilled, twirling futures. and I forgot about my fixation with earning people's respect, among other things for which I'd been told it was proper to plead until granted. You told me if immigrants could enrich a country, you didn't want to know our melting point and whether we would shine brighter than gold. You told me how I could stop confusing belonging with belongings, good with goods, by sharing the way our hearts continue to beat resilient, even without an assurance of worth. You told me there can be solace in a dead end, in knowing the sea still collapses, still runs and soars, carrying its broken shells somewhere out there. Then you buried a kiss in the dark earth of my hair. I believed it all. What else could I do? The second poem has the same name as the collection, and it's called Asterism. It's true, today too the sky arches in faithful trajectory, and even when there's no eye to keep it company, it unfurls stars for the season. Tonight, I pray for wonder, innocent thread without a needle, to play, pretend, embroidering the missing links between a satellite's silver, the dying borders of a sore, an oxtail bone I once nibbled clean. My grandmother's braids turned tinsel after 2 words, aluminum, allure, alumbrar, aludir, because I hear yesterday's cloud might shed rain over some stranger I'll meet another day, and the sheen over red pomegranate seeds on my sister's hands warbles, white like the sea, connecting us. I confess I have many questions, but I leave them unresolved for tomorrow, and tomorrow every luminous body, periphery and center, part liar, part storied lover, not a single one untethered. To end, I'll be reading a poem called Hansum, as breath singular. And Hansum means sigh in Korean. Literally, Hansum means the same strand of wind, just unspooled a little further. I sigh, and it's as if I've blown onto my father's brow until it crumples. There's endlessness in this word, an inward stretching universe of lungs and dark matter. At my sighing habit, my father rephrases some idiom, says, at this rate, the draft will cleave the ground under your feet, make the earth flicker out like a sparkler's afterglow. His words assure me, even the smallest breath can ripple. Thank you.
Wow. Ae Hee, those were beautiful. Thank you so much for reading today.
Goodness, how perfect.
That was so
Thank you.
special and wonderful. Thank you. And thank you again as well to Donna and to Jean and to Harold and to Theo. Thank you to Julie and to Stephanie at Make the Road, who helped a lot in preparing for today's event. We'd also like to thank the Terra Foundation for American Art, who sponsor our NSE program and make daily conversations like this one possible, and for their support of our growing archive, which you can view on the Rail's YouTube channel. For 22 years, the Brooklyn Rail has provided a platform for the arts, culture, and politics through our free monthly events and publication. And our events are like this one, our daily NSE. You can check the chat for a link to donate to support the Rail. And if you're free tomorrow, Friday at 1 p.m., join us for a conversation with Gala Poros Kim and Jonathan T.D. Neal on the occasion of the weight of a patina of time at the Fowler Museum at UCLA. We'll conclude with a poetry reading by Anna Maria Hong. And as is real tradition, you can now turn on your microphones and say hello and goodbye as you leave. Thank you so, so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much. That was
Yeah.
amazing.
Oh,
Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for the great
Donna.
questions,
Thank you,
everybody.
Jean. Thank you,
Great to
Harold.
see you all.
Thank you, Harold.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Hannah.
Donna.
Hi, Jane. I saw you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye
Thank you,
bye.
Theo.
Bye,
Have a great
everyone.
Donna.
afternoon, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you for the
Thank you,
reading.
Donna.